thank you for the introduction and good afternoon, I guess it is. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Masafumi Nakane, otherwise known as Max. Um, well, even though you probably are more interested in lunch at the moment, I'll talk to you about accessibility related issues and topics for next 40 minutes. So bear with me and see. There we go. Oops. I was going to show you this one. I was going to, yeah. Okay, so the this is what I'm going to be talking about, and I have to apologize in first place that it's not going to be exactly as the title suggests that the past, present, and the future of the accessibility of the Plone CMS. Instead, I noticed that I realized that it's probably uh, useful if I touch a little more on the basic concepts and such of accessibility itself. So I'll spend a little more time on that one, and I will be talking briefly about how Plone is in terms of accessibility at the maybe like second half of the talk, or maybe a little less, last third of the talk, or something like that. Anyway, so for those, except for those who are in Tokyo, I should be quite not. I mean, except for those people, you don't know me, I think. So I'll do a brief introduction of myself. Um, I've been involved in the ICT accessibility researches and activities since mid '90s. That includes research activities as a student, university students, and also I worked as a World Wide Web Consortium staff for, I can't remember, maybe like 3 years, around 2000, late 90s anyway. And I am actively involved in the FreeBSD operating systems development, not the OS itself, but the what they call the FreeBSD post collection, which is third-party packages. Yeah, and working as a webmaster, working as a sysadmin, doing some podcasting projects, and in terms of accessibility, now I'm out of university as not as, well. I'm out of university as a student a long time ago, and then after that, I involved in one of the universities in Japan as a staff, but I'm out of that position too now. So, in terms of accessibility, I just call myself accessibility advocate. Um, and probably you've been seeing me around since yesterday and noticed uh, that I am totally blind. Uh, and I've been blind since almost since birth. Just for your information, it doesn't make much difference, I guess, of what I'm going to talk about. And I'll briefly touch on the technologies I'm using to make it possible for me to use the PC and such later on. So, okay, so first, what is accessibility anyway? So, as far as I know, there's no universally accepted definition. There's a version of definition by W3C. Also, there's the ISO, the International Standardization Organization, define they have their own term and defined. But I don't think none of them is really widely accepted. They are respective definitions are being used depending on the context of the standards and such that are in question. But the definition I personally use is as shown on the screen. I suppose the information or the service or whatever has to be able to use. It has to be able to use. You have to be able to use it regardless of your ability and such. So it should be available to almost everyone with almost the same cost. So when I say everyone, that absolutely means everyone. I mean, it's as it shows on the screen. It might be you might be talking about people with or without disability or certain kind of ability. Um, and of course, there's age that has to be concerned. And then we sometimes use the word situational disability, which means like if you are driving a car, you can't really pay too much attention to visual cues on the screen. So that's basically, well, not really basically, but somewhat similar to the situation where people who are has vision issues. If you're in a quiet library, you will probably not be able to play audio in such a quiet environment. So you are basically the same as people who are not able to use their hearing ability. You may run into some accident and you may not be able to use your hands for a moment. You might not be able to use mouse, things like that. But so that's a situational and temporary disability. And so those situations has to be taken into account. And also devices in use are different. Nowadays, there's a lot of variation of access devices we have that, including the smartphone, tablets, things like that. Not just different sizes of the screens of the PC and different browsers. So there are a lot of different user environment that needs to be considered when content web content is created. And of course, there are language issues. Not everyone speaks English, not everyone speaks Japanese or whatever. So that's another thing that you have to think of when you create content, provide content, depending on who you are targeting. Now, cost of access. When we say cost, we often think of the financial factor of it, but more importantly, we have to think of the time that you need to consume in order to achieve the same goal, effort that's required. For example, if you have trouble with your hands, you may need much longer time to, for example, log into your bank service or something like that. But the idea is try to minimize the gap differences between those people with different abilities. But that's basically what accessibility could mean. W3C's web content accessibility guidelines, which I will mention briefly later, says you have to make the contents perceivable, meaning that people are able to understand it's there. You need to be able to know it's there. For example, if I'm accessing some web page and there's some picture on it, I would not know if there's no alternative text and such. But by putting the alternative text, then I wouldn't know it's there, so it's considered to be perceivable. You have to make it understandable, you have to make it operable, and you have to make it robust. Well, robust part is not so much of a problem because you just need to, it just says you just need to follow the specification of the technology that you are using, like HTML and CSS and such, and who doesn't follow the specification anyway. So anyway, that's W3C part version, sort of the accessibility. And now, but the essence of the accessibility, the key to the accessibility, as I see it, is to make everything machine readable, not just human readable, but machine readable. By that, you can make the content of web pages or information be understandable by so-called assistive technologies. And I believe next slide talks about what assistive technology is. Yeah. So it's a software or hardware solutions that make it possible for people with certain needs to use computers. But that's very rough definition. The first one that I put on the screen slide is the what we call screen reader. It's a piece of software that you install onto your computer or whatever device is so that you would know what's on the screen through the speech or braille output. It used to be that you have to have a third-party software, but nowadays there are a few major operating systems that has the screen reading system in the beginning, from the beginning as a part of the system. Mac OS X has voiceover. iOS has voiceover. They are different things, but they are both called voiceover. Android has talkback. Windows have narrator, which is somewhat limited, but it's there. It's better than nothing, actually. So those are the screen reader, and there are screen magnification software. Those are also built into many of the operating systems, and there are third-party software as well. Those are for those people with low vision, limited vision. They need to magnify part of the screen so that they can see the letters displayed on the screen without much problem. And alternative input devices, those could be very simple solution like keyboard with very large keys to very complicated switch interfaces used in conjunction with on-screen keyboard. So back to machine readability, it's like I said, it's the key to the accessibility. What it means by machine readable is think of an image of a letter as a picture, like letter A shown on the screen. I tried to make some picture, but it doesn't really make much sense. Me trying to make a picture, so I gave up on that one. And it's kind of hard to show the difference between machine readable and human readable version of the same thing. So I gave up on that one. But anyway, if an image of a letter, alphabet letter, is shown on the screen, people who can see can understand it's right away. It's a certain letter. But if it's an image, then computer would not know what the letter is unless you let the computer use the OCR technology or similar technology. Instead, if you have it as a text data, you have ASCII code or the Unicode or whatever that's assigned to the letter, and computer programs would know what the letter is, and so that's what machine readable means. That's one of the examples. Another example that goes to a little higher layer in a sense. If you put a little larger letter size phrase with maybe bold, you may think of it, you may look at it as a heading of some, within some text. But if it's only visually conveyed, then computer wouldn't know it's a heading. They could guess, but it's just a guess, and it's never be certain. The HTML and other markup languages, with using those technologies, you can explicitly say which part of the text is heading, which part of the text is one paragraph, which part of the text is a list and list items, etc. So that's another example of what it means by machine readable. So what needs to be machine readable is the content being presented. So try not to use a banner that's only made by image. To make it machine readable, you put alt text, the alternative text, or the alt attribute, whatever you call it. That's the probably the most obvious example of the content not being machine readable. And we often think of the only the contents to be needs to be machine readable, but also the user interface components should be machine readable in a way that the roles and the states of the user interface components are can be understood by other technologies such as screen readers. For example, if you have one button, like two buttons on the toolbar of the Plone 5, you click on it, some of those buttons will give you a menu. To make it machine readable, it has to say its role is a menu with some pop-ups, and inside the pop-up, it has to be identified as menu items and things like that. So those are also things that need to be made machine readable. And well, that's basically the two major things, but everything else if you can. And of course, the machine readability is the key to the accessibility, but there are also other things that needs to be taken into account, not necessarily machine readable. First of all, it should be easy to read. It's not only totally blind people who use the assistive technology. Like I mentioned, that are low vision people with limited vision. So it should be easier for them to read. Actually, if you think of just those of us who don't look at the screens, you don't really have to make the letter. You can make it really small. It doesn't really matter if you use like 1-point letter or something. I can still read. But that's not the case with many people. And it helps if it's resizable, and if it helps if users apply the high contrast settings of the operating system and still readable and things like that. So it's not really machine readability issue, but it's very important. And so, like it says, color contrast is also an important part of it. Yeah. And the user interface should be easy to operate. Well, I guess it's not much to talk about. I guess it says all on the screen. But one somewhat important thing is the last item, which says that the timeout issue. Uh, you probably have encountered those financial service where you cannot be idle for more than 10 minutes or something like that, and you are forced to be logged out. Those people who have limitation with their hands usage, it may be very hard to finish the typical tasks in the same manner as those without problems. So it has to be really thought carefully if that kind of limitation is really needed, and if that kind of limitation really raises the security. And another thing about the audio content is that, well, of course, people without hearing will not be able to receive it. You need to caption it and such. But also, another thing is if you make the audio autoplay as you open or access the web page, it really makes me mad. The thing is once I access some page and start playing something, then I will not be able to hear the screen reader talking anymore. So I won't be able to find the stupid stop button and pause button and volume down button and mute button and whatever. All I can do is press F4 or something and just get out of it. So if you really want me to look at it, then you better not do the autoplay, or maybe turn it down really low as a default volume or something like that. So it has to be you have to really be sensible when you want to do something like that. So anyway, there are a lot of other things that you can do specifically, and it's basically written in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.0, published by W3C. And that one was, well, yesterday, Rob Porter did a very good presentation covering the overview of the WCAG and related issues. So I'm not sure if it's going to be available online later or not, but if it is, and if you're interested, please go look at look at his presentation. Okay, now why do you have to care about accessibility? Well, technical aspect, if you want your site to be available only to limited people, then forget about it. You can make your website inaccessible as you can, but if you want more people to look at your content, you want to make it accessible, of course, and that will make broader audience to be able to get information from your site. And I already talked about increasing variation of the access device. The access devices variation is really increasing. One of the buzzwords nowadays is the Internet of the Things, and then we may have to think of even device without screens and things like that. So once we start thinking about those, you see how important it is to make the content machine readable. It's really going to be read by machines and presented to users or another machine or whatever in appropriate ways that can be understood. That can be understood by whoever received the information. And social and legal aspects, there's a aging population. Well, how many of you recently noticed and not admitted that you have to move it farther away from your face when you read the newspaper? How many of you have admitted and started using the reading glasses? Well, welcome to the community of the aging population. Um, I am going into that community too, but I don't have to really worry about it. It's not going to get any worse for me. So, um, those who are younger, don't worry, you're going to be there anyway. That's the most obvious example of what aging populations, how 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 much effect is it, the accessibility uh, gets to the aging population. But also, there are other issues with as you get older. It's light disabilities of different kinds as you get older. And the legal requirements that especially in the U.S., it's gotten very advanced. I would say that there's Americans with Disability Act and also the U.S. Rehabilitation Act, Section 508, that requires public sector's web content to be accessible. And there are similar legislation in different countries. Many Commonwealth countries have the Disability Discrimination Act, and I believe EU has something as well. Japan's got a new law coming up next year. Korea has something too, and that's South Korea, of course. Yeah, so many countries have some kind of legal requirement. So you want to make sure that you don't go illegal by creating inaccessible content. Oops. Oops. What did I do? Hold on. Okay. Okay. So now getting into the real topic, I think it's the main topic for the this talk, but I only have what 10 minutes, so I'll have to be brief. Uh, um, I've been, like I said, I've been. I probably didn't say, but like it was on the slide earlier that I've been using Plone since 2004 or five. It was like Plone 2.1 something, quite old days. Uh, but then for my personal projects, I often use the movable type because I'm more comfortable with PAL. And also, I had looked at various different CMSs whenever I start new projects. It's like it's a part of like a procrastination that you start looking for the right tools as you uh, progress. And I really tried, I don't know, so many different CMSs and ones that I really felt practically useful are movable type, Drupal, and Plone. I'm not really sure. Nowadays, it may be different, but that's how it's been until at least like 2, 3 years ago. Um, so what I was looking for in the CMS is that it's accessible as a site administrator, and multilingual contents are easy to host. And I wanted something like workflow and other flexible and powerful content management. And requirement as a user, it's obvious. I want something that's the generated content is being accessible for especially for those with screen reader users. And other factors is an inexpensive license, and also because I do server administration myself, I want to I want to use something that's easy to administer. Why I chose Plone, movable type was not really practical in many ways. It did have good multilingual content support and things like that, and license was kind of expensive if you want to use it beyond your personal use. Um, and I had more experience with Plone than Drupal. But yeah, okay. But other thing, from the server administrator's perspective, I hate PHP. They, well, they, with minor version ups, they break compatibility very often. I guess it's not the case anymore, but it used to be really bad. So I didn't want to use anything PHP. So that's why I didn't really go for Drupal. That's very good reason for me. But actually, Drupal is doing very well in terms of accessibility. Drupal's been used by many U.S. governmental organizations, including White House. That means they are complying with the accessibility regulation. And now, another issue though is that from a blind programmer's perspective, Python sucks too. It's a, I hate the indentation, and if you think of it, if you use just a speech output to program, you have to count the spaces. It's a nightmare. But the thing, though, is another thing is that there's an NVDA screen reader, which is a Windows open source Windows screen reader developed by two blind Australian guys, and NVDA is written primarily in Python. So if they can do it, why cannot? So I decided to go on with this. Well, it's much better to deal with Python's indentation than to PHP's incompatible upgrades and such. So I decided to go with Python. So like like it says on the screen, uh, it sucks, but much far less than PHP. This is just well, sort of like a matrix of why I decided the factors I looked at as I chose the CMS. Let's go over, skip it. Now into the accessibility of Plone in 5 minutes. Oh. Okay. Well, if you really want to go to lunch, you just need to look at this slide. It says, in short, it was really good. Like when I started using Plone, 2.2 point whatever, 3.x was okay too. When it got to 4.x days, it started getting outdated. Plone 5, it's not perfect, but I'm seeing some bright future on it. I'll try to briefly describe what I mean by that. Yeah, so until Plone 4, there's every Plone installation has a Plone, no, not the Plone, but the accessibility information page. It's at the Plone site's root, like /accessibility-info, something like that. And it has some accessibility statement. Many people, I think, will just remove it by Violet Manager or something, which I'm not sure how you would do it nowadays with Plone 5. But anyway, well, this is what it says at the beginning of the accessibility info page on Plone up to Plone 4. It looks good actually, but well, it's gotten sort of mismatched with the reality in Plone 4 days. I was going to talk about those stuff a little more, but I don't really have enough time, so you can probably look at my slides later online. I'm making it online later, so I'll skip a few slides here if I know how. So other than accessibility info page, there's something that really bugged me up until Plone 4 was Kupu, the inline editor, which was totally inaccessible. So the first thing whenever I set up a new Plone site that I did was disabling Kupu, so that I don't really have to deal with it. But on the other hand, it was okay in terms of the content that are being generated, mostly. But if you use some products, third-party products, who don't really care about accessibility, it can break things really badly. But it's not the issue with the Plone itself, I would say. It's a matter of third-party developers. Okay, now Plone 5. I had a chance to talk to Paul and other people at the Plone Symposium in Tokyo in June. And after that, there has been a lot of outdated techniques have been removed. The accessibility info page has been rewritten, which looks much better, and it also shows the commitment of the Plone community. And the TinyMC editor is really good. They released the newest version the version they released last year is really accessible with screen reader. So I don't have to disable it anymore. That's really good. And developers seem to be interested in improving the accessibility. Whenever I have issues with accessibility issues with some software, not just Plone, but any kind of software or app, I first get a little hesitant to contact the developers because I'm not so sure if they are willing to deal with the issues. And I think I share this feeling with a lot of other people with disability or certain needs. But now that I know that Plone, there are some people who are interested in improving the accessibility of Plone, I am much more comfortable giving the feedback and hope possibly some solution to the existing problems. Okay, so some things that can be improved, even though Plone 5 is quite good, there's still a lot more room for improvements. JavaScript widgets, they need to integrate what they call way area. That's W3C's standards for accessible rich internet application. That's basically to make JavaScript widgets and such to be more machine readable. Let the roles and states be explicitly defined. Another important factor is that to the education, raising awareness of the developers, not within the Plone developing team themselves, but also outside the team who do the products and theme development. There should be concrete guidelines to that says how to make the theme and products more accessible, and so that it won't cause any kind of accessibility problem. Okay. Sorry, I know I'm out of time already. So a few more slides. Bear with me, or you can go to the lunch, I guess. So if those issues are cleared, Plone 5 would be a really good choice for accessible content management and content provision. So I would like to call on everyone here to let's work closely together. it's very true that we need to, as people with certain users with certain needs, need to give more feedback to make the quality of any kind of software better. And unfortunately, I don't know too many people in the blindness community who are using Plone, but by showing the commitment of the Plone team and the community, and also by showing the fact that people like myself are using and trying to contribute, it may be accepted much more widely. And of course, I'm here to bug you, meaning try to contribute. So I'm hoping that we can work closely and make Plone even better solution, even for people with accessibility needs. I put the sources for developers. Web content accessibility guidelines tells you what you need to pay attention to when you create content. Authoring to accessibility guidelines is the those who develop authoring to, including CMSs, have to follow. So, but in general, you have to make an authoring tool or CMS that generates pages that complies with the web content accessibility guidelines. And I put down some the screen readers that you can try testing. And last but not the least, I'm very much grateful for the Plone Foundation for giving me this opportunity to come up here and talk to you about accessibility, and also have a chance to meet people from community and hear different aspects of Plone. And my slides will be here online, and you can send me questions, feedback, comment, complaints, whatever, to Twitter or email or whatsoever. So sorry that took a little longer than it should be, and that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Accessible than a badge, but some device within a page that would indicate, please give us your feedback with regards to this, and this is how you can do it because we're receptive to it.
Well, it's actually not really simple answer to that, I think, because many people don't really look at what CMS is behind when they use when they access certain websites. They are willing to give feedback to webmasters, but they don't really think of going to the developers of the site or the CMS. So I don't know. It might be necessary to or effective if the developers and webmasters communicate more closely to each other or something like that. But that's as far as I can say at this moment, I think.
Hi, my name's Christina, and I wanted to say thank you for coming to talk to us today, but I was wondering if maybe sometime during the open spaces, if you're going to be here tomorrow, if you could walk us through what the web is like for you. If you could give us a demo on your experience,
Okay.
maybe in using Plone 5 and just maybe some common websites that a lot of people use, so that we can actually experience what it's like for you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I am. I have. Yeah, I have my PC and I also iPhone and Android devices as well. So I can show you different aspects of web browsing as a blind individual, and yeah, and how it is on the Plone sites and on other systems as well. So anytime during tomorrow, I'll be here until Sunday's sprint. So anytime in the remainder of the program, feel free to just stop me or whatever.